Hi, my name is Jim Craig. I'm the president of the Veteran Studies Association, and welcome to another one of our colloquia series on veteran studies. As a reminder, the Veteran Studies Association is, well, I hope it's your association, but if it's not, you can join it. Well, our job here really is to promote and publish rigorous scholarship about critical issues shaping veterans' experiences in any country, in any historical era, to enhance public understanding, teaching, service, and advocacy. That is VSA. If you are interested in the work we're doing, I invite you to check us out at veteranology.org and think about joining us at our conference, Veterans in Society, which will be March 14th and 15th at the University of South Carolina. Registration coming very, very soon. You can even get your hotel room right now, which is on my list of things to do. All right, so today I'm super excited because we have Dr. Jennifer McKinnon, and an airplane just went over. If you can hear that, I'm sorry. Jennifer is a professor at East Carolina University's program in maritime studies and has a background in historical maritime architecture and cultural heritage management. She's worked in the US, Australia, the Pacific, and Europe on sites ranging from the colonial period to World War II. Her research areas include conflict and battlefield archaeology and public and community archaeology. Over the last 7 years, she incorporated working with veterans in archaeology. Prior to ECU, she was a senior lecturer at Flinders University in South Australia and a senior underwater archaeologist in Florida's Bureau of Archaeological Research in the Department of State. That is the coolest job title I've heard in a very long time. Jennifer is going to talk to us about working with veterans in archaeology, value added and force multiplied. Jennifer, we're really happy to have you here. I'm going to hand you the floor, and I think you should be able to share if you have slides.
Yep.
If not, let me know. We'll work it out.
Okay.
Thank you very much for coming.
All right, cool. Thank you. It says host disabled participant screen sharing. So
All right.
when I clicked on screen sharing.
I will make you a host. How's that?
Okay.
I can figure that part out. Screen share. Nope, not me screen share. You screen share.
The list of participants, I think it's the little icon next to the name. I got it. Okay.
Okay. See. All right, Jennifer, check it out. Maybe I got you.
Yep, it's looking like we can do this. Okay.
Right.
And let me get into my slideshow. All right, can everybody see that okay?
Not yet for me. It says starting, but I have a black screen. Oh, okay. We got you.
Okay, cool. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to talk today. What I love about the Journal of Veteran Studies and this group is how diverse folks are. So I'm hoping you will accept an archaeologist who is interdisciplinary and works with veterans and also folks who are researching veteran, issues and areas where we can kind of come together and collaborate. So, as you said, I work as a maritime archaeologist. I teach graduate students in the program in maritime studies at East Carolina University. We're one of 3 programs in the US that teaches this. And so we have the opportunity to have some wonderful graduate students who come through and get their masters and sometimes PhDs. So let's see if I can forward the slide. Trying to figure out which button allows me to do it. All right. I've got a new setup here on my computer. So I've come to the next slide. So I am an archaeologist and I do both terrestrial and underwater archaeology. But a lot of my practice involves community archaeology. And you may wonder what community archaeology is. Community and public archaeology. That is simply archaeology that's engaging the public. And we can talk about all types of public from, Indigenous Pacific Islanders, which I will talk about, to, involving veterans in these rehabilitative events as well. But it really is about engaging the public in archaeology in a variety of different ways. And it can start with the conception of a project, and it can go all the way through, publication and presentation. And so a lot of my work involves that from start, the idea or concept of a project, all the way through to the final reporting and publications and conference presentations. And so I work really closely with public groups and community groups in doing that. And I also try to be as diverse in terms of who can participate in that as well, which has driven me to working with veterans. But I do work out in the Western Pacific. And so a lot of my projects are focused on Pacific Island history and heritage. And so the communities are involved in that. I also, in an area where you might think that there are more men than women, try to make sure that I have a good balance in terms of gender and identity and ethnicity. And so those things are important to me, as well as I kind of talk about some of the work that I've done with involving veterans. So scuba rehabilitative events are important in terms of the research demonstrating that they have been able to reduce stress and symptoms of a variety of injuries and illnesses. That is what I do. I work underwater and scuba dive and record sites. And so it's really easy for me to kind of get into this literature of how scuba diving can be advantageous for veterans after they are transitioning into civilian life. So it's also been shown to enhance social experiences and improve self-concept. It's a great opportunity to engage in risk seeking behaviors in a healthy environment, which is important as well. And when it's combined with other types of occupational therapy, like some biofeedback, which we did on one of the projects, and breathing exercises, it can help relieve stress and things like that. So we're kind of piggybacking on, the data that's out there in terms of that, just that physicality of diving and breathing. Breathing underwater is a totally different type of breathing than you do on land. You have to really kind of focus on that. And so we've seen and heard veterans talk a lot about how it's very calming underwater for breathing, and how their stress levels go down, even though they're sort of in some instances in a riskier environment. So how did I get involved with working with veterans as an archaeologist? Well, the guy up in the top right, Pat Smith, who is a graduate student of mine, came to East Carolina University, and he said that he was interested in doing a graduate degree. He had been assisted by this organization called Task Force Dagger Foundation, and they had taken him on a dive trip. And Task Force Dagger is for special operations, and it services personnel and their families, both active and retired or medically retired. They run special programs that send folks to clinics and things that won't be covered by the VA or the government, but they also run these rehabilitative events. And one event they run is Dagger Dive. Dagger Dive brings together once a year in the Florida Keys, it brings together whole families. So it's not just the veterans that come, because their idea is that if the veteran is hurt or injured, so is the family. And so they bring the family, the children, and they come together and they learn how to scuba dive. Learning how to scuba dive actually kind of pushes a reset in the family, because you can't communicate underwater, right? It's like a non-verbal working together. So, when they talk about, these folks going off into the field and sort of being, part of a team, and then coming back and say mom or dad are at home. They're the alpha parent, they're the ones running the thing. And then all of a sudden, mom or dad comes back from the field and things get shaken up. There can't be two alphas. They have problems communicating and working through this. And the children haven't been around the mom or dad, because they've been out in the field. So it's kind of brings the family back together to spend real quality time, learning a new skill together, but also learning how to communicate again and work together and be part of a team. And so that's one of the things that they do. And whenever Pat Smith came and wanted to, he was interested in history and he loved diving. When he came to the program, I told him that I was really interested because I do battlefield archaeology, which I study World War II aircraft, shipwrecks, amphibious vehicles underwater in the Pacific. I told him I wanted to work with a veteran organization because I thought it would be a real symbiotic relationship, and that the veterans would know a ton about, battlefields and weapons of war and tactics and strategies and all that kind of stuff. And I could learn from them as they could learn, from me, or have some kind of, a project or purpose. And so, so he introduced me to Task Force Dagger. And at the same time, this was in 2017, I had started a partnership with the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency, which is the agency that recovers lost service members from previous wars. So World War II pilots that have gone down underwater, we work on projects to find those aircraft, excavate and recover the remains of those service members. And so when I pitched that to them, because when we first started talking, I was like, you want to come to Saipan and do battlefield archaeology? But when I developed that partnership and I pitched that to them, they were so incredibly excited because, as you know, they take the oath of never leaving a fallen soldier behind. And so it became more than just let's learn archaeology. It became a mission, which was really important in the development of our relationship over the years. And so we created what they called the Joint Recovery Team, which is, a relationship between East Carolina University, Task Force Dagger, and also the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency. And then joint recovery has multiple meanings. If you can imagine, we're recovering lost service members, but these guys are also recovering. It's also a joint branch organization. And so I'd say it's more heavily on Army, but they are incorporating other branches. But so that's where that kind of came from. So we pitched the idea to develop this project and go overseas to run our first mission with DPAA.
Yeah, we're seeing slides change now.
Okay. All right. So now you've seen Pat.
Yep.
Now you've seen DPAA. Yep. And now you've seen the Joint Recovery Team.
Yep.
Okay. Now you can see what I was talking about. So we took them to Hawaii, where they could visit the DPAA lab and learn what the mission is, and see, some of the remains, and also learn kind of what that was all about. Halfway allowed them also to get some mobility, take medication, because it takes 2 days to get across the Pacific. This is a long journey for folks who have injuries and illnesses. And so getting them halfway there to have a respite for a couple days and learn about the history, and then getting them to the islands, they got to visit the Arizona Memorial, and then finally they landed in Saipan, which is part of the Northern Mariana Islands. A lot of people have heard of Guam. So Guam is part of the Mariana Islands, and Saipan is in the Northern Mariana Islands, and it's actually a commonwealth of the US. So Guam's a territory and Saipan is a commonwealth. So in 2018, we arrived with 13 of veterans, and you can see that I also had maritime archaeologists that specialized in training, also graduate students who were all part of the team. So this is very much a joint effort where the students were either gathering data for their thesis or were involved in helping with the project. One of the really important things was the partnership that we developed with the Florida Public Archaeology Network. Now, this is an organization that does its job training the public in archaeology. And so rather than me reinventing the wheel, I reached out to the specialists who do these types of trainings. And so we developed C's into a specific veteran training for these folks, and actually gave it to the board of directors first to see if they were interested in this type of training and what changes we needed to make. So that's the bottom left hand side for us giving this training. And then when we took them to Saipan, we gave them the training on island. So they learned all kinds of topics from, what is underwater archaeology, to the laws that protect sites, to how to record sites, issues in conservation, artifacts, all that kind of stuff. And then we also added, because this is specific to World War II, and a lot of maritime archaeology focuses on old ancient shipwrecks that are wooden, we added, how do you identify aircraft? How is it constructed? What are the parts of it? And then we taught them specific ways to search for them. So a circle search, where you drop down on a point underwater and swim in a circle for 5, 10, and 15 meters to look for artifacts or a site that's underwater. Luckily for us, most of these folks actually already had the training in doing sorts of circle searches, taking photographs, navigating, using compasses, that kind of stuff. So once we did the sort of classroom lectures, we threw them in the pool and got them used to using, underwater equipment, like writing and slates and things like that, and cameras and what kind of photos that we take. And then you can see this is a photo or an image of the island. All that block that's out there in the water is actually different targets that we were going to test, because the World War II battle for Saipan in 1944 was between the Japanese and the US, and it left literally it's a literal sort of graveyard of World War II sites, aircraft, shipwrecks, assault vehicles, landing craft. And so part of their job was to actually dive on these anomalies, what we call them in archaeology, and identify whether or not it was an aircraft. So we were looking for Hellcats, and Avengers and Dauntlesses. Those are 3 different types of World War II aircraft that went down during this period. And so you can see that, they were diving off of different types of platforms. These are ribs that they're on, but we had to modify and make sure that we had another platform for Caleb, who couldn't pull himself into the rib because he was a double amputee. So we had to make sure that we had the right platforms and arrangements for them to be able to access the sites and do the work. And each night we had a debriefing, of what we did and planned for the next day. So a lot of the kind of like planning that they're used to was what we already do, because it's a 30-person operation, excavating or jumping on targets or anything like that. So they were very used to like that very time specific, mission specific. Here's what we're going to do today. And here's what we accomplished. And here's what we're going to do tomorrow. So we had a great, summer there. We spent 7 days searching and had over 130 dive hours underwater. And we jumped on 82 targets, which, range from a washing machine, because people dump stuff in the water, to, aircraft parts, right? Which is what we were looking for. And that is what we found. And so this was pretty amazing, because back in 2010, you can see on the top left, archaeologists always take notes when they meet, when they go into the field. So So we were taking notes. I was taking notes back in 2010, and I spoke with a Japanese informant who had told me that there was a hellcat somewhere. And so I would remembered from 2010 to 2018 that, you know, I had remembered somebody telling me there was a hellcat. And I went back and talked to this guy, Masa. And so he took us out. He said, oh, I'll show you where it's at. So he took us out onto the water. We were on our boat. He was on another boat. And he was like, it's somewhere out here. And I was like, this is a big ocean. How are we going to find this? And so he was like, well, and this is all in Japanese, and he's interpreting it to me, or his partner is. He said, if you run a line between this area and this area and put some divers in the water, maybe you'll find it. So the next day we took some of the participants out, and they were out off the back of the boat. We were towing them. So you can tow and put your mask on and look underwater. And sure enough, one of them was like, I think I see aircraft material, dropped off. You know, we turned around, we did a dive, and it turned out to be a Hellcat, which is what we were looking for, which Hellcats have a single pilot loss. So you can see in the bottom, this is somebody recording the site, as well as the tail piece and a wing piece of that Hellcat. And these are photos from the dive master, the Japanese dive master, who told me about the site. So we were super excited that we had actually found something. That mission was, you know, an accomplishment in and of itself. And before we did the mission and after we did the mission and project, we did do a questionnaire asking questions about, you know, how was the archaeological, you know, program? Did they enjoy it? You know, what would they do differently? You know, would they do it again? You know, and just trying to get some feedback, right? We also had them keep notebooks. That was not as successful. They weren't really interested in writing about their experience, although we did get some information. And I had a specialist on identity who was working with and doing informal interviews and discussions and collecting, sitting in the nightly briefings, who was collecting data as well on sort of experiences and what kind of information was being shared and whatnot. And so we have that data and have processed it, and then just recently published that. Thanks, Mariana, for getting that through the process in the Journal of Veteran Studies. So if you want to read more about that, that's there. So we went back out in 2019 again to work on the same site to do some underwater excavation. So as you would imagine, a lot of the guys wanted to go back. They were not finished with their mission. They found an aircraft and they wanted to return. And so return we did. So we did another training. Some of the folks were new too. We covered more topics. And specifically, we covered archaeological excavation, which is what they were going to do, and talked about the different types of record keeping. And then we put them in the pool and showed them how to make excavation units and how to put the underwater dredge together. And then we dove on the site. So this is our platform. The visibility out there does not suck. It is very nice. You can see that there's divers on the site excavating, and our platform is just up above. So this is kind of like a half in, half out of the water image. And pay attention to this image because it'll come up in a different format in a minute. But yeah, so we spent 2 weeks out there excavating, and this kind of shows you all the jobs that they were doing. So they were excavating in the top left corner, and then it was going through a screen, and so they were at the end of the screen and the top right, and then in the middle we would take the sediment and put it into a bag and pulley the bag up, and then it would come into a screen, and we'd be screening it and looking for basically bones and teeth, you know, human remains, and then anything that was not that or wasn't important to the recovery would go back on the site and be put into mesh bags and reburied. So these are some of the sort of tasks that they were involved in. And we also had a side project. We were looking for a down B-29 in deep water. So again, sort of risky behavior, you know, risk-seeking kind of behavior type stuff, but in a controlled environment. And so they have extreme skills in terms of being able to dive deep. So we were utilizing that as well. We also had a researcher as part of that team that was supported. She was a PhD student working on biofeedback and understanding heart rate variability and looking at stress. And so we've got another paper coming out soon about that. So we actually had them participate and learn a little bit about biofeedback and tracked some of their health data. And so that was part of that process of understanding what the physiological and functional results of scuba diving and participating were. We didn't have a whole lot of, I guess, it's very difficult to run that kind of equipment where you don't have regular internet because we were uploading information, and also the equipment is difficult to take out because it's electrical. Anything you take out on a boat, we had problems with some of the equipment as well, but we are writing a paper on the efficacy of like actually doing that overseas and on water, and looking at ways in which we can get different types of sensors that will be more will be better. So we finished that second season and came back, and they wanted to do some training, some more training. So we did some more training for folks in Biscayne National Park, and added another group of divers to that, which was the horse soldier group. And so the horse soldiers partnered, and we added those folks, and then we went back in 2022 for another excavation. So I just put this up for anybody who's like an archaeology nerd. This is the type of stuff that we're doing. So this is not the aircraft. I've superimposed this image and geo-rectified it to scale. But these units that you see, the squares, are the squares that we've excavated. And those are 2 meters by 2 meters, if you're thinking about size. So that was 2 seasons worth. And then I didn't add the third season onto there yet. But that's the sort of area that we excavated. It's a very large area, and we usually go to 50 centimeters. So we're moving a lot of sand. It's very rigorous and very like physical. And so we did 2019, we skipped 2020 because of the pandemic, and then we went back in 2021, and then in 2023, we went back again for a third season excavating this site. And that was the last season. We closed this site up. We were not successful at recovering a pilot. I could talk more about the archaeology at some point, but there's a lot. You know, he could have been thrown from the plane. There's a lot of different scenarios we can go through. But all in all, I think everybody who sort of participated in this, and some came back 3 years in a row, it was pretty meaningful for them, even though, because no data is still data for us in archaeology, right? So in all fields, really. But I want to kind of turn to the 2023 NOAA Citizen Science Project, because we ran a mission in early year of this, and then we turned right around and went back out, and we took family members with us. So we took veterans and family members, wives, daughters, and then partnered with the local community as well to do another sort of citizen science project where we also brought in local veterans. So we incorporated local veterans, local Pacific Island veterans, and the task force veterans as a combination, and we're out there for 2 weeks working on deep water sites and a bunch of other, types of sites that aren't DPAA related, like mission related. But they learned how to take eDNA samples, so some more sciencey type stuff, and doing some more sort of like public outreach. So that kind of brings me forward to almost now. Just this fall, we did a panel, the first panel on working with veterans in archaeology at the Public Florida Archaeology Network held the first conference on public archaeology. So we had our first panel, which was super exciting because we had the Veterans Curation Program, which is a veteran program that has been running for many years. It's supported by federal funding, congressional funding, and it trains veterans in skills of like curation, artifacts, maintaining artifacts, conservation, that kind of stuff. It gives them some, hard skills, but it's more of a transition program. It's not to create an archaeologist, neither is my program, but it is to just kind of help in that transition back. And so some of the veterans came from that. We also hooked up with a new organization, Veterans Archaeology Program, and then we had Task Force Dagger guys come and talk about their experience. And out of that came the Veteran Archaeology Network, which was awesome because at the very end, they were like, how do we keep this going? And how do we get people who are archaeologists and happen to be veterans connected to each other, but also veterans who are interested in archaeology connected and doing things, because there's more and more folks doing this kind of stuff. And so Tammy Gilliam created the Veteran Archaeology Network, and now we are starting a Facebook page, and it's just going to be a place where people can go and also meet. So right now they're having their meeting, so I missed it, but they're meeting every 2 weeks to kind of help get this off the ground and running, which is really incredible, I think, in terms of like where the next steps are going. So in sort of wrapping this up and closing, I think for the veterans, this is a pretty significant kind of like experience for them for all the reasons that I outlined at the very beginning, but for many of the reasons that I have learned over the past few years of working with them. There's some disabilities and illnesses that can and can't be seen. And I've had many of them talk a lot about how they feel whole underwater again. Specifically folks who might have neurological issues or amputations, they can move underwater differently than they can move on land. The excitement of finding things and being involved in just like discovery and adventure, being able to come back together as brothers, as teammates. Some of these have been teammates. We have a first sergeant and a warrant officer who served for many years together. And the meaning of that sort of recovery for lost service members. And that's just kind of like the tip of the iceberg in terms of talking about what it means to them. But I don't want to necessarily suggest that, that this is like, not a reciprocal relationship and that I don't get as much out of it as they do, because I feel like the winner here whenever I have them in the field. In the bottom right, you can see that the proverbial what is hitting the fan. We're dragging anchor and all hands are literally on deck. Usually when something breaks on a project and I have graduate students, I have to stop, fix it, teach them how to fix it. When something breaks on a project with them, I don't even know it's broken. It's fixed and I'm back up and running, and then they tell me later, right? And so they also have contributed really critical information to like understanding the aircraft wreck. So we had one guy who was an aircraft crash specialist who told me, who explained to me how this aircraft crashed. I'm the archaeologist. I should be doing, but this is the kind of like, information that we can share together. There's also bonds made between like graduate students and these veterans that have lasted, and I think will last a lifetime. Some of the veterans have actually gotten my students jobs or have worked on that. They've also sat on, now we have some sitting on committees. So on thesis committees, like the aircraft crash investigators sitting on a thesis committee. They've come to graduations. So, like that kind of like relationship building. Also, the graduate students really appreciate like understanding, some of the struggles and some of the things that, some of the sacrifices that they've made, and also have backgrounds, family members and stuff. So they come to understand that a little bit more. And so, for me, there's a lot of wins. This partnership is, and that's that image of the excavation. So one of the veterans asked me for photos and drawings because it was such a significant, kind of experience, and he wanted to get a tattoo of it. And so I sent him a bunch of stuff, and he sent me a photo and was like, "Hey, guess what I got on my leg?" And so I was like, wow, that's cool, because that's actually me diving underwater. So I always joke like to my husband that I'm a tattoo on another dude's leg, which is super fun. But it's like, again, I think it speaks to the fact that it's a meaningful experience, right? And one that they will carry with them for some time, and come back to. So, but I think that idea to kind of get back to it, because I saw you kind of leaning in, like, what is that? The partnership between academia and government and veterans and benevolent organizations, I think, is a really incredible sort of learning experience. It's also an across the aisle sort of issue, where we are more, and I've heard it said so many times in the last several years, we're more alike than we are different, right? Where two groups think that they're totally different, they come together and realize how similar they are and how much sort of like drive and passion they have for the same things. And so, seeing that is really, I think, significant. It gives them, new mission, new purpose, new focus, helping, with challenges. Some of them have come out of this. We're brand new divers on the first project, and now are dive instructors and dive every weekend in caves. And so they've gone from like 0 to 100, in terms of like their experiences. Again, that kind of bringing closure to families that have waited for loved ones to be returned is another. And for me, the archaeology is better. The history, the archaeology, the research is better. I've also become way more aware of how archaeology is really ableist, and how I really need to change the way that I approach accessibility issues and things like that with just my graduate students. Had I not worked with veterans, I probably wouldn't have come to that conclusion earlier than now, right? So it's been something that's pretty cool in terms of also engaging a broader audience and bringing veterans sort of into the mix. And this is some of the things that I have co-published with some of the veterans and some of the researchers, and the most recent one being the article in Journal of Veteran Studies. And that is all I have on my presentation.
Jennifer, thank you
Sure.
very much. Wow, super neat. I'm going to take, I guess, host's prerogative to ask a first question. First of all, I want to say this title, the Joint Recovery, is such a fantastic, multifaceted name, and you may have just stumbled on it, but it works so great from so many levels on the joint side and the recovery side, and then together. So really neat on that. So my question is, like, this is daunting to me as a professor for costs and structures, and then when you add just the work that you do in first place, and then when you add veterans with mental and physical ailments and the structures that you need to build to make sure that there isn't an emergency, how do you think through that? And then, is Joint POW MIA helping to fund that? Who's helping to do that work?
Yeah, sort of all of the above. I will say that the Joint Recovery Team was their idea, so that was their name. But yeah, it is crazy because you're talking about 30-person crew, right? That involves them and us. It is funded largely through DPAA funding for the missions, but also their own fundraising. So they fundraise as well. But I managed to be able to pay their flight, accommodation, and local transportation on island. And then whatever they need to pay extra, which they pay their per diem. So they pay for their food, but they upgrade them, right? So they also get mileage that gets donated to their organization. So that allows them to sit in more comfortable seats, all those kinds of like little things that help run the project. I could not do this if this organization was not so incredibly organized already. They have their own board. They have a medical board, right? So they have medical specialists who sit on it. And when I talk about when they're like, who can we bring? I'm like, bring whoever you want. I will, if I can strap a camera to your head, you can do archaeology underwater, because you can take a video of a site and we can make a 3D model of that, right? So we had a person that was quadriplegic on the last project, and we created a platform to get him in and out of the water. His wife came with him to assist, because there's a lot of things that you have to kind of like manage physically. So they help with all of that. It's not just up to me. I try to focus as much as I can on that science end of things, and then that's why I have the partners who help with the training. But it is a big operation. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else have a question? Go for it. Yeah,
I unfortunately have to go for another meeting, as much as I would love to. I'm going to watch the rest of the questioning on YouTube, because this is absolutely fascinating. I wanted to give you the comment that I loved this presentation. Thank you for coming and giving it to us, because it's absolutely amazing.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, I took a bunch of notes. Thank you so much. I don't want to just say it, I want to contribute to the conversation, but I also just have to echo what everyone said, which is this was incredible. And personally, the degree to which you're doing kind of public and community engaged work I'm a PhD student at North Carolina State University, so not too far from you.
Yeah.
My husband did his first semester of college at ECU, and then he transferred to where I was. But anyway, yeah, just thank you. And personally, it's good for me as somebody who's very engaged in volunteering and community work and wants to do more community-based research, to hear you talking about this. I particularly love what you said about risk seeking, an opportunity for risk seeking behavior that is, part of a maybe post-service professional opportunity. And I'm really interested in how, if you could speak to what your relationship is like with these participants in terms of, been thinking a lot recently in my work about this kind of civil military divide. And I think many people, also in my volunteering work with our Veteran Studies Association board, I'm very interested in how we expand our membership, our network and interest from just folks who are already in this space doing this work. And I think there's a lot of, I'm military affiliated, my husband's active duty, but I think I can get a sense that there's a lot of anxiety and just general uncertainty among folks who don't have a direct connection. And I don't know if you do have a direct connection to the military, or how you kind of navigate that, even for myself as someone who hasn't served, when I'm interviewing veterans and when I'm, volunteering with soldiers. I know that I face that kind of code switching. And so I think it would be really helpful if you could tell us a little bit about what that experience was like, coming from, maybe outside a little bit of the community, or, how you connect.
Yeah, so for sure. I mean, the main thing for me, and because I do community and I work with like Indigenous Pacific Islanders, I'm not Indigenous Pacific Islander, right? So I have to be very clear about my intentions, and you know where I'm coming from. So I have not served. My husband has not served, but I have family members who have served. I'm not the child of a veteran, right? So I usually say that right up front, you know, and then, you know, that leads to, you know, other conversations about why I'm interested. And honestly, my first interest was like, oh, they could help me, right? It wasn't about like me being like, oh, I want to help veterans, right? So it was more of a kind of like, oh, this would be cool because they could help the archaeology. It only kind of became like apparent to me that this would be beneficial when I really engaged with the organization and what they were doing. And they kind of taught me how it was beneficial, how diving was beneficial to them, right? And so I learned a lot more from them about, you know, how that could be helpful. When I do engaged research, I give a lot of myself in many ways. You know, it's not just professional, but it's personal. So, because I have to gain the trust of the folks that I'm working with. So, you know, as an example, I just yesterday edited, you know, somebody's after action report after having gone to Mexico to do traditional medicine, you know, for PTSD and TBI. And so, you know, he came back and he's like, can you edit this for me? You know, and I'm like, of course, you know. And then while we were talking, one of the other veterans was calling me on the phone. So these aren't like just professional relationships, they're personal relationships that get developed. And I think that's kind of an interesting thing because maybe this doesn't work for every field, but like we go underwater together, so we're supporting each other's life, right? So we have a close relationship with each other because we're like, you know, I'm looking out for them underwater, they're looking out for me underwater. You know, it is a sort of risky kind of thing. So, you know, it's not going to work for every profession, but a lot of that relationship is developed in that, like I give more to develop that relationship and for it to be, you know, understood. And then, you know, they say things like, you don't seem like a professor, you know, and I'm like, what a backhanded compliment, but I'll take it, you know. So yeah, we have found that, you know, I learned their language, you know, I've learned like which special group you know, like which special forces group, what that means, you know, like what the personalities of the groups are. And they know like I'm interested in that, not from the perspective of like, you know, a negative space, but it is, I'm a researcher and I'm just interested and personally interested. And so I just try to be clear with my intentions and, you know, I'm not trying to be somebody, you know, who I'm not like, and really when they're done, they're done. I've also introduced them to a lot of other practitioners, right? So when I first started this, I was like, you're not going to just work with me. You're going to meet these archaeologists, National Park Service, NOAA, all these different groups so that you can expand your network, because you don't need to just work with me. You're going to have folks and you're going to want projects. And so I helped him get an MOU with DPAA so they can run their own projects if they end up like Pat gets his master's degree and goes on, you know, they don't need me to keep going in this venture. And that's what I consistently tell them too. So that's kind of how I navigate that.
That's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mary, you got any questions?
When's the next dive?
Yeah.
Do you already have something scheduled? Of course, I'm sure.
Yeah, we do. We've got a trip to Portugal. So we're going to be looking at a B24 off the southern coast of Portugal. So we're lining up 8 to 10 folks to come and join the crew. So it'll be that one will probably be a much bigger operation. So yeah.
So I'm
It's
interested
fun.
in your connection. We have one of these in St. Louis, the Veterans Curation Project.
Yeah.
out
Yep.
of the Corps of Engineers home here. And I'm interested in the connection there because I've been working with them probably for a decade. Occasionally we get students from them or our students go there,
Yep.
but mostly they're doing curation of objects that have been acquired because of a Corps of Engineers dig somewhere or a government dig somewhere that then the Corps of Engineers gains access to. Are you working with them in towards like some of the artifacts and the objects that you're finding working with them, or is it just kind of like just sharing?
Yeah, we just started sharing because there's only a handful of us engaging veterans in archaeology, right? So we were like, well, let's come together. So I tried to find as many people as I knew. We're like, we're gonna do a little workshop, or not, it wasn't a workshop, it was a panel. So yeah, it's very kind of early days. The UK is doing and has been doing a bit more. The Veterans Curation Program is the longest running archaeological engaging program so far. The UK started a program in field work, Operation Nightingale, and they've been doing stuff for a while, and not so much underwater. And I would say we're the first ones who have brought the underwater element to it. So it's all a lot of sort of firsts here in the US. There's another organization that couldn't come to the panel, but yeah, so we kind of have to get together and talk about like, where are we going? Are we trying to create archaeologists? Are we trying to just make transition programs? Are we trying to just do rehabilitative events? Can we just do all of that, and it's fine to have all those different goals. Like, I did not create this program to make underwater archaeologists. That is not my intention. So yeah, it's just kind of figuring out like where to from here is where we're starting.
That's so great.
Cool.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
Okay. I'm just at the very beginning of getting started on doing a program evaluation design for a transition program in North Carolina for veterans, the North Carolina Veteran Farm. It's like transition program for that. And so I was really interested about what you said. I had memoing or journaling built into the evaluation design, and based on your experience, it sounds like folks don't want to write about things. And so I was just wondering, like, I get it. I should journal and I don't. So what other kind of means of collecting information from folks throughout? I know you said kind of informal interviews, and there was an identity oriented researcher. Do you have recommendations for just like, did you do a pre and post program kind of like content assessment? And just, I would love to know a little more about that.
Yeah. So we did a post. We wanted to do a pre, but for another program, reach out to me later, because I have another program that we did a pre and post. So yeah, we did a pre and post for one of the other veteran programs I haven't talked about, but we did a post for this one. And I thought that was helpful, but I would have liked to have done a pre just to see what they were thinking that they were going to get. Yeah, journaling did not work. And I thought it would, because I was like, you're getting a really cool archaeology journal. It's yellow, like it's a write in the rain. They would not write unless I, maybe sitting them down and giving them 10 minutes and literally standing there. But that doesn't seem right to me. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
let's take these 10 minutes to journal, like we're so tired when we're in the field. So it wasn't. So I would say those informal discussions, but maybe even peer-to-peer. Yeah, peer-to-peer, I think would be really helpful. Because, and then that could be communicated to somebody and like typed up, or whatever makes it, I think, easiest for that information to be recorded is truly like where you're gonna get the information. It was hard to also get them to do the biofeedback, so they were supposed to do it in the evenings, and there was some equipment failure and whatnot, and we did some on the boat, but that too. And I don't know if it was from a lack of telling them why it was useful or meaningful. I feel like we did that. And I should probably ask that. I have a sense they just didn't want to do it, like, honestly. And also they don't want to be subjects of research, right? I mean, they told me that over and over again, and I'm like, that's fine. And that's totally fine, but this is your organ, and this is from Task Force Dagger. This is me, Task Force Dagger, speaking through me. This organization is paying for, you know, this event, and they want to see whether or not it's effective. And so they're partnering with us to kind of gather that information too. So you're not a subject matter, you're helping the organization who is trying to support and make this happen longer, right? So when it's described in that way, they're like, oh yeah. So, you know, and then for the final survey on the last project, I literally gave it to them at the airport when I knew they had 30 minutes to sit. So I gave it, I was like, I'm not going to get them back. I'm going to give them to them and I'm not going to get them back. So I'm going to save them until we get through customs. And then we're going to sit there and I'm going to hand out pencils. I had a stack of pencils and the surveys, and I had them do them there. And I collected them before we got on the plane to go back. So, and then they knew, they were like, you're so clever. Like, well, last time I didn't get as many as I wanted, right? So I'm not pulling anything over on them. I'm just being, and they love it. They love like seeing that too. They're like, damn, yes, you got us. Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much. I will reach out to you.
I totally see that. Like, oh, well played. You got me.
Yeah, exactly. They love it.
So, Jennifer, thank you very much for your presentation, for your great work, and, you know, and best of luck in Portugal, or off the coast of Portugal, I guess.
Yeah.
And for those of you who are watching later on our YouTube site, just thank you for participating as well. And we hope to see you at the Veterans in Society Conference in March 24 at the University of South Carolina. Not too far for you, Jennifer, if you want to take a little drive.
Yep.
And with that, we'll end right here. I appreciate everyone and your participation. Take care.
Thank
All right.
you. Bye-bye.